Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside me as always. Win, lose, or draw. Draws against relegation sides feel like losses, because that's kind of what it feels like. But we've been through worse. We started off in a much worse era when we started doing these things. But yeah. So we'll just get right into it. No point in checking in on each other at this point. Milan again, not to no surprise, dropping points against a side that they should not be dropping points against after a fantastic victory. Jekyll and Hyde, but more of the frustration just pouring through because of where Serie A is in terms of sides dropping points and in terms of the gap between first place and sixth place, I believe only being 2 points. Milan obviously in seventh, so I believe we're about 8 points off the top, if not 7. We're 8 points off the top with a game less than everyone else because of the Bologna situation. Listen, not all hope is lost, but all faith is lost on my side. I don't have much faith in this team. I've kind of stated that many a times. The defense, just when you think they can't do worse, they manage to supplant that. This game, I think we saw the ball go in the back of the net 5 times, 2 of which were offside. Milan never looked like they had control for the most part of this game. There was a stretch during the first half where they looked like it. But Matt, once again, an immediate concession of a goal against a terrible side in Cagliari. Milan can't seem to get out of their own way this season. And what we were saying leading up to this game with me, Marco, is that you actually have some potential momentum to ride into the international break with here. You could actually try and salvage something. Milan don't do that. They draw against a terrible side, and Cagliari are 16th.
Now they're 16th.
Now they're 16th because of that. I mean, the gap between everything, they're 1 point off of relegation with Lecce. Lecce has 9 points.
And Lecce just signed a new coach, Marco Giampaolo.
Yes, that's right. I did see that. So again, I guess we'll kind of just get your thoughts with this. We'll start with the negatives, get them out of the way. There were some positives I'd like to highlight, but those are just individual. As a team, I think there's too many negatives. Listen, I think heading into the international break with this draw, I keep on thinking in my head it's a loss.
When you score 3 goals and you concede 3 away and you draw,
just take it.
It's a loss. It's not 1 point gained, it's 2 points additional lost. Right? Like that's the general vibe.
And the salt in the wound is that result between Inter and Napoli yesterday.
Yeah. You had a chance to really kind of close that gap and again build momentum. I don't know if you want me to just kind of
take it.
Yeah, all right, cool.
I'm out of thoughts.
This has been the theme, guys. I mean, how many matches this year that we've had a good result or a string of good results, and then we drop a stinker, and it's like we can't get out of our own way. And this was basically just almost a mirror image of what we did last year. If you recall, we beat PSG in the Champions League. We were great, had a complete performance. And then I think the next Serie A game, we draw or lost. And it's very frustrating because it comes off the back of a really good performance, not even good, but great performance right next to the Derby victory. And you think this has to be the launching point. We talked with Marco last episode. We've been talking back and forth via text saying like, all right, this is the time we go. And it's not. It's just not. And it's the same issues, the same problems, the same struggles defensively, organizationally. We're woeful. It's always a mad scramble to get into positions and to, contest corners and free kicks. And look, this is no disrespect to Cagliari. I mean, they're a team that, look, when they're on the relegation side of the table, there's desperation, right? They need to scrap across any single point. So they're going into these games with the mindset that let's just get a draw. that's our bar. We know this Milan team is shaky defensively, one of the worst in Serie A defensively. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'd like to think they're probably mid-table to lower when it comes to goals against.
Honestly, it'll surprise you a little bit because there's a few teams that have actually like struggled, like
Giving up more.
Lazio, Inter, even Atalanta to an extent. There's no like truly great defense this year. Napoli and Juve are really those sort of sides. But Milan, Lazio, Inter, and again, Inter, Lazio, and Atalanta, they've all played one more game than Milan. Milan have conceded 14 goals. These sides have also conceded 14, Atalanta with 15. But the difference is when Milan concedes so much, they're always in bunches. It's not really like when I guess the same could apply for the others. Like, just go ahead.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm in a circle here.
The point being is that I think, look, there was the big talking point from Fonseca after the Real Madrid victory that, he basically was saying how it's easier to play against, the Real Madrids of the world because the game is more open. It's more inviting for Milan to play the way they want to play, for guys like Rafa and Pulisic to get that space to do the most damage versus playing against some of these other teams in Serie A where the space isn't there. It's much more congested. Teams will sit behind, put numbers behind the ball, and they're not afraid of defending because, frankly, as I just mentioned, a win for them is a draw in a match like this. Against when they see those teams like Juve, Napoli, Inter, those teams that are kind of jockeying up on the top of the table, they go with the mindset that, hey, let's just get a quick draw, get out of there. That's going to help us salvage any hopes we have of avoiding relegation. And in this one specifically, it becomes very much frustrating on the side that Milan put up 3 goals, right? Like, it's a match where you're like, all right, 3 goals. 2 of them come from Rafael Leão, who has been cold, hasn't scored enough goals. That's been a huge talking point, right? He gets 2 goals, 2 very nice goals, 2 very nice build-ups towards those goals. And you're like, all right.
Reinders and Fofana's assists were incredible.
They were spectacular. Fofana gifts one away, literally gifts one. Like, Christmas came early. Christmas came early for them, got them a goal. Great.
Him and Pavlovic, a disaster.
Yeah, terrible. And here you are standing 3-3, and to top it all off, it's not just the 3-3 result. It's not just the draw. It's like it comes very late in the game. When I saw Tammy get the goal, I was like, all right, like, this is going to be another one of those bad games or bad score lines, but at the end of the day, let's just get the win. And here you are, 88th minute goal, and it's a shot. It's a fantastic goal. And it's always a guy that you're like, who is this guy and why is he scoring world-class goals? It's always that type of outcome.
Zappa's an Inter youth product, by the way. I think everybody likes to rub that in. We get it.
So it's just results like this have been the microcosm of the entire season so far, where you create chances, you get goals. There's some players that are struggling that do really well, and you're like, all right, this is it. We're going. And then Mike Maignan, who was very, very good in the Real Madrid game. He's been very, very good this year. Could have done a little bit better on some of these goals, even the one that Fofana gifted away. So it's like Milan really struggled to put together a full, complete victory or 90-minute performance, even in the wins they've gotten. There's always been something where you're like, they played well, they got the win, but...
Yeah, I mean, Monza, Udinese are two highlighted examples of that. Yeah. There's, even if some of the draws, like, it's blowing leads. I'm kind of frustrated with Fonseca with the changing of the back line. I think you should have kept the back line. Like, Tomori should have played in this one. And I know people are like, and this is an argument I get in or debate I get into often on Twitter about aerial duels. Like, Tomori is weak in that regard and all that. And I'm like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. But at the same time, again, just like the match against Liverpool and many other matches, aerial duels are irrelevant if you can't even mark a player to begin with. The amount of space afforded to some of these players, and by the way, Kush made a pretty good point on that third goal. Teo was marking players inside the box. Noah Okafor, guy lauded for work rate, apparently, leaving Zappa wide open. for that. Where if you look where he's standing, he's on the outside
Yeah.
of the 18-yard box, just chilling. He's not marking anybody. He's just standing there. If that was number 10, we wouldn't hear the end of it. So I find that very funny on how the double standards work for players. Tomori was just coming off a positive game. I understand there's different styles and approaches that Fonseca likes to take, but Fonseca, one of the bigger issues that he's had, and I think it's been a blessing and a curse for him, not everyone's guaranteed starter on a game-to-game basis, but also you're opening up the door for inconsistencies, wild
Yeah.
inconsistencies. Because if you don't have that stability in the back line, like it's garbage. And I think it's funny because these spot mob ratings and whatever have Malik Chow as like the lowest rated defender on the side, and he was arguably the best one, and he wasn't even that good. He was like mediocre at best. Emerson Royale is just utterly useless. Utterly useless. Teo has been, for everyone that has had high standards for a player, right? And we've seen all these stars, right? Because Leao, people are getting on him because he's inconsistent. Goal scoring isn't really there, even though he's played very well, I thought, in the matches he's been in the past few weeks, is that Teo Hernandez isn't getting the criticism that he should be getting. Because Teo, for someone who's up for a contract extension, there's play, there's attitude issues, not running back, getting benched, the Lazio incident. Like there's so many things that you could just keep on going back and back to that you're like, what the hell, man? And they're not even using anyone else to try and put in that position. Like Terracciano is too wonky. Jimenez is scoring over the weekend again for Futuro, and he's still not getting minutes with the first team. It's perplexing on a level. It's sort of like you're not covering your bases when things aren't going well and you don't have the proper defenders in there. Pavlovic, again, Nemanja nailed it. Like this guy is just simply not ready. He's not ready. There's positives for what he can bring to the team. I like his aggressiveness. I think he brings that sort of tenacity that is something you would like in a defender, but he can't mark. He constantly puts himself out of position. Like the Fofana goal or the error that you want to talk about, Fofana and Pavlovic have no idea chemistry-wise what they're both doing with each other. Like that is like, it was so amateur that Pavlovic was running towards Fofana when Fofana went to go pass the ball back. That's on both of those guys. More so Fofana because he should have been reading that better. But for the life of me, I also don't understand what Pavlovic is doing. So, and again, Pavlovic is supposed to be a great in aerial duels. And you know, Fonseca rightfully calling out Teo, saying Teo could defend better. And again, publicly, do I like him saying that stuff? No, I don't. Again, I don't like how Fonseca does that. Once in a while, when you call out a player, right? Mourinho is great at this. Other managers are great at this. Certain players deserve to be made an example out of. But when you consistently are calling out players, it's going to backfire, regardless if you're right or not on it. And I do agree where Fonseca is coming from. Teo has been a disaster defensively. He's a liability lately. And that's not great considering how his game is predicated on physical ability. And he's aging the way he is. And the contract situation is where it's at. I think it's going to turn into a very interesting thing this coming summer in terms of that. For me, it's sort of like, it's just so unsurprising. I sound like a broken record. We're doing the same thing every fucking week. The defense isn't good enough. It's not even close to good enough. I've been supporting this team for a very long time, and so have many other people, especially you guys in the comments and the listeners and yourself, Matt. This is the worst defense I've seen from this club. Like I really can't even be bothered to like look at like some positives with it. Outside of Matteo Gambia, I do not trust or have faith in a singular defender in this squad.
No,
Can you believe that? You know how embarrassing that is? That you don't even want to like look at somebody and be like, okay, yeah, he's respectable. No, I don't even think that about the majority of these guys, and that's embarrassing for a team with the offensive talent that they have and where the table in Serie A is. Because you know this, if they were like even like average, they'd be competing for the title right now.
Yeah.
That's why it's so infuriating for so many fans. Because guess what? Despite us disagreeing with some fans on, you know, certain players and stuff, I think everybody knew that this isn't a surprise. No one is surprised by what's happening this year. And I think that's why a lot of people are having this soul sucked out of them, even the most positive of fans. So your final thoughts before the positives that we want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes when I come on here, like right now, like I'm just kind of devoid of words because
I know, yeah, because I'm rambling.
what haven't we said already? And I tweeted it out, yesterday. I was like, I'd like to comment more on the match, but what
Yeah.
more can be said that hasn't been said already in that yesterday, the moments after the result, and even in the weeks prior since the season started? Like, what else am I going to really add? It's the same problems. It's you can look good in certain games, and then other games you look terrible. It's the defense hasn't been figured out. I think most people were understanding of the fact that like the Parma game, I know they were bad results to start the season, but everyone was kind of more like in that camp of like, all right, new idea. Certain players came into the team late. They didn't train too much in preseason. Let's give Fonseca some rope here. Maybe we'll figure it out, and maybe we'll be an average defensive team. To your point, we weren't really expecting this team to be a defensive stalwart, a Juventus type, which they don't score, they don't give up a ton of goals, they don't give you an inch, but they are getting results and all that. I don't think anyone expected us to be defensively locked down, but to have an average defensive record because this team is capable of creating chances, it's capable of breaking down teams, it's capable of getting goals. Fonseca, to his quote, you can't lose a game where you give up, you score 3 goals. You can't lose a game where you score 3 goals.
And we're counting this as a loss for
right. Yeah, lose, draw, whatever.
Yeah,
that's my view. Like I'm paraphrasing, but like you can't blow a game that you get 3 goals. You can't. And your star guy gets 2 goals and he finally breaks out of his funk. And
you
can't do that off the back of a great victory in the Champions League. It's simply unacceptable. And for me, it's just there's really not much more to add to the same conversation we've been having. Is this team under this coach? I don't think will figure it out defensively. One game they might give up a ball, they might look okay, but if you guys are expecting this team to all of a sudden wake up out of the international break and to flip a script and to all of a sudden figure it out defensively, good luck, because I don't see it happening. To your point, there's not a defender in this team individually that I can say that's our guy. He's the one that's going to help us anchor this and steady this defense. Look at your right backs, liabilities defensively. Look at your left back, who's not even really doing much of anything offensively. He's
exactly. So if he's not doing that, he's sort of very mediocre.
Right. Look at your central defensive pairings. Each week it's changing.
It's a rotation.
And I understand, and this is something we did praise Fonseca earlier on in the season, that, for all the criticism he was receiving with, his selections and the way he was trotting his teams out, at least he had the balls to say, I need to get results. I'm taking you out. I'm getting some guy I think I can get a result. But there's a way to do that, and there's a time and place for that. And I didn't think the time and place was off the back of the Real Madrid win ahead of an international break.
Yeah,
you keep
exactly.
The momentum going. You run out the same defensive pairing in this game. You want to rotate out and put Pavlovic in for 15, 20 minutes in the second half? So be it. But this is not the game to over analyze and over tinker and over rotate, and overcomplicate things. These guys have been rotated plenty. You've given Rafa 3 days off, 3 matches off in a row by not starting them. So you start him here, fine. But there's certain guys in this team, especially defensively, that if you have something, my goodness, don't touch it. Yeah. Don't touch it. Just leave it. Exactly. Let them build chemistry. Let them build momentum and consistency. That's what was so crucial down the stretch in that Scudetto winning season. We had guys, Simon Cagliari, we had guys kind of feeling their way into the starting 11. And what did Pioli do? He was like, Tomori Kalulu, those are my guys. Those 2 players weren't spectacular in the air. Were they spectacular?
No, not at all.
They weren't. They were not.
No.
So, but it worked. They knew their assignments. They knew where each other had to be in certain moments. And this is fundamentals, guys, like tracking your guy. Players having having complete wherewithal and space to go and have clear shots on goal.
Which
We're match day 12
yeah.
in. We're 12 match days in, and we still haven't figured that out.
It's and again, that's where it kind of gets, because now it's 2 managers in a row with these problems. I think the style that is being forced upon said managers, and again, I blame Fonseca and Pioli for not changing things or still using like RLC, for example. Pioli not trusting new signings, Fonseca kind of not trusting the old guard. It's very funny how they both mess up in that regard. And also the other thing is too, because a lot of people love to blame managers and players, and rightfully so. Again, this is, and everybody does do this as well, but management, like, to me, this is where management has so much egg on their face that they're so embarrassing. And I believe it was it's almost close to 40 million for Pavlovic and Emerson Royale. Alessandro Buongiorno, regardless if he's better in a back three or as opposed to a back four, was like the clear-cut guy you go out and go sign that is familiar with the league. Both Emerson and Pavlovic are not that familiar or have that much experience, especially Pavlovic. Emerson Royale, not good. I think everybody knew it. Like, it was just one of those signings, like, everybody knew from the start. Negative. To me, management didn't even give Fonseca good defenders to use in this. And I also think to an extent with Pioli, but the funny thing with Pioli was that Milan's attack, I think, looks better this year than it did last year.
Yeah.
To be quite honest with you, I think it's a lot more diverse and fluid. So for me, and I love what he's done with Reinders, and there's positives to Fonseca, but ultimately, Milan is about results, and they're just not getting the results in the league right now. I think he's very fortunate that the league hasn't been run away by certain teams. They're still relatively close. They have a game in hand compared to other teams. And again, this is how we looked at it last year with Pioli, not how we agree with management and Redbird, but this is how they look at it. Why are they going to sack a manager when they are not that far from top four, which is, everybody knows, that's ultimately their low bar. That's their goal. They don't go the extra mile to go all in for a title. We know it. That's part of the downside in winning number 19, was that thinking that they were a lot closer to where they want to be than they are. And that's the unfortunate reality of that. I don't want to harp too much on the negatives. I want to end more on a positive note.
Mm-hmm.
This was a positive. Very difficult match to get into when you're his age at 16 for Francesco Camarda, getting his starting debut for Milan. Cagliari, obviously not easy. We know about low blocks. We know about physicality. Honestly, if you watch the entirety of this match, or the entirety of his debut is around 63, 64 minutes or so, solid, honestly, because we know what we're talking about here with a kid at this age. So for me, as long as you're not awful, that's good. And anything above that is great, I think. I think there's always positives to take away from when you're at that age and you're doing all these sorts of things in terms of being able to develop and progress further as a player. So I think personally with Milan and Camarda here, you could take away some positives. He almost had an assist to Chukwueze. It was a difficult ball to try and finish, but Camarda's intelligence on the run to get to the ball, turn back and cut back, his technical ability is so sound. I think he's very intelligent for his age. Physically, not quite there yet. Doesn't obviously have the experience either. But for me, I'm taking away serious positives from this. And it's certainly something to build off of. I don't know when we'll see him start another game anytime soon or get minutes of this length, because Tammy's back now. We'll see if Jovic returns. Morata obviously had that head clash. So there's going to be 3 players or so ahead of him in the pecking order. But all in all, getting a start out of the way and playing relatively decent, I thought was a plus for Francesco Camarda.
In a match like this, I don't think anyone was expecting Francesco Camarda to hit the ground running. I didn't think anybody expected Francesco Camarda to go into this specific match and, set the league alight, score goals, look like a world beater. I think the focus in this match was you wanted to see how he operates from the start, which is obviously different from operating and trying to feel yourself around a match that you enter into at the 75th minute, 80th minute mark, where your mind is sort of trying to be more possession, retention, see the game out, control the outcome. Whereas in a match from the start, you want to see how a player inserts himself into certain opportunities that come about, and they attack. How does he link up with certain players? Does he fit into the way we want to attack? Does he fit into the way we want to play football? And while there were some things that you can see that there were obvious growth opportunities for him, you mentioned the physicality, which I know he has grown in my opinion. When we saw in the Champions League, and I know it's that was a 10-man Club Brugge, but looking like, at least visually looking like, can he withstand the physical aspects of the game? When we saw him come into make his debut last year, right? Like, I remember there was a ball that was put in behind, and I'm like, well, this guy is not that fast. Like, he's just not getting to that ball. He doesn't have the legs for it right
How
now.
much do you think his legs were heavy just because of the moment? I think it was
I
huge.
also think too, there's that, but there's also the fact that
he was 15.
15, like, he's such a young kid, right? So when you see a match like this, I know these guys are conditioned, right? They're training, he's still a good athlete. Like, to play at this level, you have to still be a good athlete, in my
100%.
opinion. But as far as the intensity level of this football match, these 60 some odd minutes that he played versus the 60 some odd minutes he would play in a, Serie C match, there's levels to it, right? Like, the defenders are a little bit more aggressive, perhaps, or a little bit more astute. They do certain things throughout a match where you're like, that space is normally there for me. In this match, it's not there for me. Or this opportunity to go into this channel is there. It's not here today. So I think overall, the goal from this start for Camarda was to show that, all right, can this guy, like, let's see where he's at. Because ultimately, this is where we see this player in the next couple years, right? Is starting Serie A games, even if he's there as a backup rotation to like Morata or whoever we have. And I think these are important building block moments for him. I also think that there was something to this by bringing him in to break the GGO record. I don't know if you sort of saw it, because I think he broke the record, right? He was the youngest Milan player to debut in Serie A, or was he a little bit older than GGO?
Yeah, it was a 2-day difference.
So he has about 2 days.
I think the moment was literally like Tammy was not 100% healthy.
Yeah.
Jovic isn't there. Morata had the head injury.
But Jovic was Jovic available? Was he injured? Like,
no, Jovic is still injured.
Okay. Because I was going to say that says a lot about what his
reality, and that's also why he was getting minutes in the Champions League and minutes against Napoli. And also, like what Fonseca was also saying, if you're good enough, I'm going to use you. And just a fraction offside against Brugge. I think it's a lot closer than what we think for certain players. So I think there's something to build off there with him. So I'm happy. I'm happy for him there. Our guy, number 10, Rafael Leão. Funny, a brace, yet we're sitting here talking about how bad Milan still was. So it's almost like the overreaction to work rate and who to blame for results was completely overblown by people who have no idea what they're talking about. It is very, 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 very funny and ironic now how we're sitting here when the player had 2 goals and was the main reason that they were in this game. And yet, somehow, Milan still concede 3 goals. And it could have been 5. So where are you now? Where are all of you that were doing that? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because you're morons. That's what it is. You have no idea who you want to blame with this, because it's fairly evident, and I was dead on about this, and I'm going to take my victory laps. He still scored, and it didn't matter. If you want to get on him for not scoring for 3 to 4 months, totally plausible. You're right. The finishing is still inconsistent. How many times did we see him sky shots that he should be skying?
I'm not going to say it again.
Being too unselfish, despite what some Twitter jabronis are thinking. The Club Brugge passing up a clear chance on goal to score for a layoff of an assist that's more difficult than the shot that he could have been able to pull off. The finishes were fantastic, which just kind of, I guess, leads to more frustration for some people, and I totally understand that, because they're like, why isn't it always like that? I will say that assist from Reinders in that goal that's not easily replicated. The second goal, again, rounding the goalkeeper, maybe we could see some more of that. I think there is something to that. The calm finishing, I would say, not necessarily the rounding of the keeper. But again, it's just proof. It's just proof that a lot of people did not understand the issues, and they went to go and blame the best player because the best player was struggling. And you're not looking at all the nuances of what makes a team work. And quite frankly, it's the defense that's a disaster, and that's garbage. And that's the reason why Milan are not winning games, because Leao's work rate is the same as it was the year they won the Scudetto. Okay? A lot of it could be masked if you have a good defensive side.
Yeah.
Let's please stop acting like it's about work rate. And guess what? Noah Okafor, what did he do work rate wise when he came on? Next to nothing. He's partially to blame, again, like I said, for that third goal. Leao, congratulations, by the way, the birth of his baby boys. He had twins, so congratulations to him. Maybe some dad strength for that brace against Cagliari. I think it's great news that he's playing well and that he is slowly turning the corner here. But even he can't carry points against a side that concedes as much as this. And that's a point you've been making, I don't know how many times. Like, they're going to have to score 3 or 4 goals in order to try and win games, which is completely unsustainable. And so your thoughts on him?
Yeah, and that was, the difference, right? Because I had this conversation with many people. I forgot what match it was, but I was very opinionated, and I was expressing myself on Twitter, and obviously that doesn't always lead to civil discourse and civil conversation, right, and discussion. And people were saying, oh, he didn't score. He only scored 1 goal in the final 7 games of the Scudetto winning season, but they completely disregarded the fact that he had how many assists in the final match day, how many assists in the final matches of the season, and he was still scoring goals, creating goals. And Milan, as I mentioned, weren't bludgeoning teams. They weren't this high-octane, high-scoring team.
I think we barely conceded in the last 12 games or so, I believe it was.
But they weren't this offensive juggernaut either.
Correct.
The Lazio game, the Verona game, I think that Rade Krunic had like a goal in that game, or that was like the free kick where Krunic.
No, that was different. That was the year before.
Florenzi
they were
scored
missing a bunch
Verona.
of players. It was Florenzi, Tonali, and then obviously the Lazio game was Tonali as well.
Fiorentina was a tight game that year. That was
Fiorentina gave the ball away. Leao took it. He scored. He scored against Atalanta. Teo also had that like incredible run to score that goal. There was just like little moments within those matches where you were like, okay, wow, like the difference is individual brilliance while having a stout defense.
Exactly. And I think that, we've had moments this season where the attack looks good. The attack is creating goal chances. The attack looks fluid. And in a match like this, I thought there was a lot of strong moments. You mentioned Rafa. Rafa kicks on. He gets 2 goals for himself. That's a huge confidence builder for him. And Fonseca said that was the reaction we were hoping for. He had the Real Madrid performance, and then he had the match here, and he commented saying like, yeah, I think like what I've seen from Rafa is that's exactly what I want from him. So that is a positive, because we're not going anywhere fast without Rafa playing at a high level. But
Correct.
It's the difference, right? Is Marco Messina mentioned it too in the post-match, after the result, and he said the same thing. He was like, what team in history has won anything with not being decently to above average defensively? You could score goals, man, but if you can't stop them from pouring into your own net, you're not going to do anything in this league, especially a league that really prides itself on, defending well, being organized, having an aligned setup and an understanding where our players are going to be, and having a system and an identity. And that's what Fonseca preached. He preached balance. He preached my first line of defense is my attacking, right? But if Milan aren't getting those opportunities on the front end and teams are building out, that leaves them a little bit exposed. And you're seeing how many times they're in retreat mode and they're getting beat, and there's players turning around, and they look like anytime the other team gets the ball and they're going, you're holding your breath. This team is going to score. And that was no different in this one. So as I mentioned, as we've been saying, this team will go nowhere. they might not even make top 4 because look how competitive it is right now at the top of the table.
Yeah.
Lazio have won 10 of 11 games.
They've
Napoli
looked good.
are very good defensively. Juventus, very good defensively. They're still unbeaten.
Atalanta,
Although
I don't think I've ever seen Atalanta have more confidence in what they're
Atalanta,
doing.
Inter. So good luck. Good luck.
Fiorentina's been
Good
great.
luck defending this way and making it into the top 4. Good luck, because it's not going to happen. Milan have to be at least average defensively, and I'm not saying that they can't pick up results along the way. I'm not saying that.
I think they will, yeah, which is going to make it more frustrating.
This season, I feel like it's been so incredibly frustrating, even more so than previous ones, because there are some positives. There are some players that have taken the next step.
There's an incredible offensive juggernaut.
And now it's like the opposite, where we're like, we were craving right wingers, we were craving attackers, we were craving goals other than Rafa and other than certain players. And now we got it. And now it's like on the opposite, and we can't stop a goal to save our lives.
Horrible.
It's
difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people to watch this, and it's just very funny. I think I made the point on that Milan podcast account about or actually it was on my own personal Twitter about, and again, this isn't really that much of a shot at Fonseca, but this is just rather the philosophy of Redbird and management, in which you go and you quote tweeted this, I think, as well. When you go the cheaper route for manager and just like other areas, you kind of leave things up for not interpretation, but just there's no guarantees. Right? Like Fonseca did some good things with Roma, but overall, I think he had a squad that wasn't really built to win anything, and his style and philosophy wasn't able to kind of fit within the league. Same way that they approach their spending in the market. Sure, like someone like Pavlovic, for example, I think is a perfect example of this. It's like, okay, he's around 20 million. We're not buying a guaranteed player like Buongiorno that we know is great in Serie A. Same would have applied to Bremer, by the way, when he was available. You know what you're getting with those guys. Pavlovic, way too many question marks. When you're spending 20 million and getting question marks like that, it'll cost you more in the long run, because now, is Pavlovic good enough to play at Milan? Will he ever be good enough to play at Milan? And suddenly you're looking at like, okay, we got to look and spend to buy another center back. So however much that's going to cost, Matt, you're going to be at that number that it would have cost for Buongiorno. Just like you get rid of Fonseca, then you're going to have to be paying Fonseca and another manager and so on, that you could have just paid a proven top manager, and you don't have to worry about that because they're so fixated on this costs so much in this moment. But you know how much money you actually save in the longer term when you do stuff like that? When you have that opportunity to spend money and get something guaranteed, more like Pulisic technically, right? Because we knew if he just stayed healthy, we knew what the potential was. It made sense under Elliott. It made sense in the past when the team had bigger issues. They're profitable. They have a better future. They have a great foundation. Add to it. Spend like the team deserves for it. And I know, again, this is my final point. I'll let you go on this, is that when you have all this money being invested, you can't just play this game of, maybe this will work, maybe that'll work. They're realistically, seriously, and I'm not trying to be dramatic here, and this is why it's all the more frustrating, they're kind of only 3 players away from being something really good in Serie A. Because, like, you add another top right back, you add a top center back, you add a defensive midfielder. Where are the holes then? Where are the huge holes within that team?
But that's what we were under the impression of what we were going to do this summer, right? Because the argument for Lani, Moncada, and the way we went about our market last year when we sold Tonali to fund that market was, well, we had so many needs. We had to spread out that money, and we had to address 5-6 holes in this team.
Right.
And that's what they did, right? It was a numbers game, a volume game, and they brought in 6 guys worth in that 20 million bracket, right?
Correct.
And Pulisic has been great. Reinders has been great. Loftus-Cheek had moments last year, but generally speaking, I think people are frustrated with him and frustrated with that deal because they could have spent that money plus another 15 or whatever that they've maybe had on an upper echelon type prospect / player to move the needle more than maybe RLC does, who is a good midfielder, but he's pretty limited at this age of his career as to what you're going to get from him.
Yeah.
Then we came into this season and we were like, hey, Milan might have to sell. That was a conversation. Milan might sell a Magnon. They might sell a Teo. They didn't. Might sell a Tomori. They didn't. They kept the same group. Now everyone was saying, okay, is this the summer where instead of 5 to 6 guys at 20, we're going to get 2 to 3 guys at 30 to 40. And now we're going to get, to your point, the 2 to 3 missing pieces of high caliber that put us over the edge. We didn't do that. We stayed with the same approach. Emerson was 15. Pavlovic was 20-ish. Fofana, who I do like, and it was a little bit more than 20. But you see where it's like,
at least
that's where the
Fofana
margins
was
are in this game. And that's what you're seeing. The margins are there for you. Look at the way that Inter went out there and got Pavard last year for 30 plus million, whatever the fee was.
Correct. Yeah.
He's a World Cup winning defender. He's played for Bayern Munich. He is well established. He is one of the better defenders in this league.
Mm-hmm.
You needed it. The move, in my view, if you weren't going to get Xerxes and spend the 40 million, my view, the move would have been to, okay, Buongiorno. He's the guy. And I think I mentioned it on this podcast. I was like, Buongiorno would be the guy for me. Because if this team is not going to be consistently scoring goals or consistently,
we said that
the defender would have masked a lot of issues, because now Milan don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be a team that puts up 2 to 3 goals a game. They don't have to be perfect in that area. They could be a team that wins ugly 1-0 and or 2-1 and is good and organized defensively. And that is something that always frustrated me with the people who look at Mota and they're like, oh, we're not scoring enough goals, because you're getting results. Like, you're holding good teams.
They haven't lost a game.
They haven't lost a game. Would you rather us be Juventus, who are a little bit frustrating offensively, but man, they don't give you anything defensively. And they lost their best defender coming into this year. They lost him. And look at how good they are defensively.
With a bunch of younger players too.
That way, or do you want to play this sort of football where you're risking a lot going forward, but man, like, you're going to get beat more times than not defensively? Yeah. And I think there's a way to have more balance and have a little bit of both, because Milan did have shared elements of those in the Scudetto winning season. But I think that people, they sometimes want this glamorous type of playing. And sometimes when you want that, it comes sometimes at the sacrifice of your defense. And how paramount was this defense down the stretch of the Scudetto winning season? Answer that question. I would give a little bit offensively if we could be steady, not even spectacular, steady defensively. We don't have that. It's almost like we have to give one to get the other at this point. So that's it. I don't really have much.
We said that with your point on Buongiorno and Xerxes. I think we were both in agreement on that. We were sort of like, okay, if you're willing to spend 40 million on one player, then why are you abandoning that altogether? And one, with a player that kind of still had some question marks on that price, with Buongiorno, you checked in January. The price was still relatively the same. It was still pretty close to 40. And you're sitting there tears. And it's so crazy to me too, because in my opinion, the way I look at it is like, and maybe you agree with this, maybe some other people disagree. When you are Italian and when there are Italian players, and some Italian players are worth purchasing for a certain amount, when you get that player like him, you get him for like 10 years. Realistically.
Yeah. Because most of those guys don't leave. Like, and
why would he leave? They're not going to leave the country. Tonali was an incredibly rare.
This is the other side, because I want to also make this point too, is that one could say, and people might say, well, Matt, Conte Napoli came for Buongiorno. When you have Conte, a coach who has that sort of pedigree, and you have Napoli coming in there with the money that Torino or Urbano Cairo were asking for, Milan really weren't in a position to get him. But I argue the better prepared team would have abandoned ship sooner maybe on Xerxes and said, hey, this deal is not happening. We're going in for Buongiorno. So there's things that we see, and again, we don't have the full picture because we only get in what really the media tells us, and we're relying on the really reliable reports when it comes to Milan, like Vitiello and some of the main dogs. But that's where the margins come in. That's where the better teams make the difference. They say, hey, Xerxes not budging. We're not getting this deal done, because they were working on that for months. The team,
that's why I respect
a more prepared management would have looked at this Xerxes situation saying, Kia's not budging. Let's go back in from Buongiorno. And hindsight's 2020. Hindsight's 2020, because people can say,
we said it then.
Matt, you guys wanted Xerxes. What happened?
We said it then.
But we said it.
It's not hindsight.
So,
we said it then.
I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, and I think that to add insult to injury, this team, in my opinion, is not spending in January. Regardless of what reports are saying that Milan are looking to go into the January market and get 3 new players, I don't see any reality where Milan all of a sudden spend up in January to appease a coach who they don't even know is going to be there the next following week. And that could be their excuse, because they're going to get in there. We haven't been, knock on wood, we haven't been hit with too many injuries, thankfully.
Shocking. Wonder how that happened.
Of course, right? We haven't been hit with too many injuries. So their argument could say, well, we have, like Ibrahimovic said, right? Well, we have Milan Futuro to help get some players. So that's going to be their out. That is my prediction. Between the uncertainty with Fonseca, between, to your point, the positioning in the table when no one's really running away with it, and Milan have the game in hand for February with Bologna, I don't see a world where Milan all of a sudden try to address these current issues in the January market. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, again, with this management and ownership group, it's like, okay, I won't believe it till I see it. And then on top of that, the other point that I made on that Milan podcast Twitter account was this: Moncada's contract is up in June. Moncada was hired and kept because Maldini and Masada were sacked sort of relatively late, heading into a summer where you need all these preparations and these players that you want and your familiarity with the club and so on and so forth. It's sort of like they had no choice but to keep him. And the funnier part, in my opinion, with that is, what does the new director think if there's a new director coming in? Does he like these group of players? They're going to have to agree with the way Redbird want to do things. And then when you're sitting there saying, like, okay, do they want to get rid of Fonseca? But say they sack Fonseca prior to that, then they would be paying Fonseca on the new manager. And if the new director isn't in and the new director comes in and they say, I don't know if I like this manager, on top of the fact that we are paying for Paulo Fonseca, this has a chance to be even worse than we anticipated. So realistically,
look at Roma.
Well, Roma's just.
I know. I know.
I think the last point I would say is this: I am not defending him. I will not defend him. I think a lot of the things that he's done has been indefensible. But Jerry does have an opportunity for himself to right certain wrongs. And I'm not saying Maldini back. No, that's not going to happen. No. Like, we got to. Maldini, if he ever works for Milan again as a director, it would be very rare. It would have to be with a new ownership group that is completely aligned with his ambition, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Jerry, the right thing to do would be poach Atalanta's directors, poach a club that consistently finds great talent and understands Serie A and adapts to Serie A, as well as being able to advance in Europe. That's what you have to do. You have to do that. You can't do this pipeline of Redbird guys and where they've had relative success at other clubs. You need people who understand Milan. You have to. Because Moncada and guys who never had been in a position like this, same with Zlatan Ibrahimovic, same with Ferlani, they never had jobs like this. And when you don't have jobs like that, it's a learning curve. And guess what? At Milan, you shouldn't have a learning curve. You should be a proven winner. And this, again, for the final point, is not a team that you bought in 2016, which needed a massive overhaul and time to rebuild everything. This team literally went to a Champions League semifinal.
Team was packaged.
They won a Scudetto. They just beat Real Madrid. They beat Inter. There's something there. You have to go in and stabilize it and give something sustainable for the future. Because if you do that on top of where you are profitability wise, the talent at a foundation level, you can do good things. The thing is, you have to fucking pull it off first. So we'll see. Doubt it. Believe it when I see it. Any other final things and stuff that you want to plug?
No, a much needed international break. I feel like we just finished one, but I mean, the way we play, I'll take it. I'll take the downtime, and it doesn't get easier coming off the international break, guys. We got Juventus on the 23rd, I think.
Correct.
So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, at this point, again, knock on wood, we don't get any injuries to our guys in international break. But I think it would be a good opportunity for, and I'm saying this, trying to be jokey and lighten the mood here. It's going to be a good opportunity for us to see Sami Ricci if he does play.
Oh no, he's out.
Oh, he's out. Okay, I think Locatelli got called up, right?
For him.
Yeah. Okay. I said it would have been a good opportunity to see the players we're not going to get, and Ricci would have been one of
No,
them.
it's you guys can go in the. It's really annoying how Inter are basically going to sign all the players that I like, because I was like, oh, Taremi. You know how big I was on Taremi? Inter.
That's
Same thing with Ricky. I even wanted Pavard at one point. I would have really thought that would have been an intriguing signing. Yeah. So unfortunately, this is where Milan's at. Sant'Angelo stuff here at Matt_Sant'Angelo, at AC Milan Bros, at that Milan Pod, at Martino Puccio. Thank you guys so much. Subscribe, like, comment, give us your thoughts, vent away, be logical. And I appreciate everybody that has done that. Again, Apple, Spotify, you can go and find us.
Be polite too, guys. Be polite. Come on.
Yeah, they've been okay. People have been good.
Well, it's not always for everybody. It's for some people that ruin it for others.
They have been banned from the channel, so they can't even be here. But yeah, thank you guys so much and take care.